Welcome to Illicit BL Stories. If you're here for obsession, tension, and feelings that ruin your day, please like, subscribe, and share. Now let's get a little illegal. The day my adoptive family sold me felt like any other Tuesday, except this time the bruises on my wrists came from zip ties instead of their hands. I sat in the back of the black SUV, staring out at the blurring city lights giving way to dark countryside roads. The driver hadn't spoken since he collected me from the cramped flat where I'd spent the last 12 years scrubbing floors, washing dishes, and swallowing insults. He's ready. He's 22 now. Ripe enough for marriage, my father had grunted. My mother's laugh was brittle. About time. I've been feeding that little Omega parasite for 16 years. Time he earned his keep. Marriage. The word didn't make sense. I was an unwanted Omega. No one courted trash like me. I'd spent my life invisible except when they needed someone to hit or humiliate. They dressed me for the transaction like premium merchandise. A white button-down and slim black trousers were handed to me. Put it on. And don't cry. You'll ruin your pretty face, Mother had said. Pretty face. That was the only reason they'd kept me. I was adopted at 6 because I was marketable. Raised like livestock. Fed scraps, dressed in hand-me-downs, beaten when my heats made the house smell too sweet. They'd waited until my body filled out, until my pheromones turned heads on the street, until I was worth something. Tonight I was worth millions. A cheap floral Omega perfume was sprayed behind my ears, the kind that screamed submission. I could still hear my adoptive sister's cruel giggle as she aimed the bottle. Make sure the vegetable gets one last good whiff before he finishes rotting. My mother had thrust a small duffel bag into my arms before they shoved me out the door, mostly worn clothes and the single photo I'd kept hidden. Me at 6, grinning too wide because I still believed adoption meant belonging. The Moretti estate rose out of the night like a fortress carved from obsidian. The iron gates parted, and the SUV glided inside. My pulse thundered in my ears. Corridors stretched endlessly. No one addressed me except to bark directions. This way. Eyes down. Don't touch the walls. My sneakers squeaked embarrassingly against the floors. At last, double doors swung open to reveal a private medical wing that looked more like a 5-star hotel suite someone had invaded with machines. Soft golden lighting, heavy silk drapes, the faint hum of equipment. And in the center, a wide hospital bed held the most feared man in the underworld. Alessandro Moretti. Everyone has heard of him. Even motionless, he stole the air from the room. Thick dark hair spilled across a sharp forehead, cheekbones carved like weapons. Full lips parted just enough to show the edge of perfect pearly teeth. Tubes ran from his arms, a ventilator hissed in steady rhythm, monitors blinked calm green lines. 4 years ago the Alpha ruled the underworld with an iron fist and a razor-sharp mind. Ruthless. Brilliant. Heartbreakingly beautiful. Women used to throw themselves at his feet, men used to beg for his mercy. Until the car crashed 2 years ago that left him brain-dead. Now tabloids called him the fallen Adonis, a beautiful corpse on life support, a tragic waste of a perfect face and body. A god reduced to a vegetable. And now I was being sold to marry him. The lawyer handling the paperwork had explained it like signing for a car loan. Legal spouse under the new Omega marriage statutes. You reside here, provide daily personal care, maintain public appearances as his devoted partner. When medical advancements permit, and they will, you'll undergo artificial insemination to produce a legitimate Moretti heir. Your adoptive family receives $30 million immediately, with an additional 20 upon confirmed pregnancy. $30 million. That was my price tag. My body. My future. My everything. The head nurse, a beta woman with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, gave me the orientation with clinical detachment. This is the primary suite. Your private quarters adjoin through that door. Duties include bathing, grooming, changing linens, recording vitals when prompted by the system. No unauthorized visitors. No leaving the grounds without explicit approval. Meals arrive on schedule. You are not considered staff. You are family now. Family. The word landed like spit. She left without another glance. I stood rooted at the foot of the bed, duffel clutched to my chest like armor. The room felt too quiet except for the rhythmic beep 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 of the heart monitor. It was strong. Steady. Too strong, perhaps, for someone declared vegetative. I forced myself forward. Up close, he smelled faintly of cedarwood soap and clean cotton sheets, nothing like death or decay. His chest rose and fell beneath the thin blanket. Long, elegant fingers rested limp at his sides, fingers that once signed death warrants and sealed multimillion-dollar deals. Now they were useless ornaments. I dropped my bag and sank into the chair beside him. "Hi," I whispered because the silence pressed too hard against my ribs. "Oh, just Kai. I guess I'm your husband now." "Nothing. Of course." A shaky laugh escaped me. "They told me you're gone. Like really gone. But you don't look gone. You look pissed off even like this." I reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. His skin was warm, human warm, alive warm. My fingers lingered a second too long. "Sorry," I muttered, jerking my hand back. "I'm not supposed to touch unless it's necessary." But I did it again anyway. Because no one was watching. The words spilled out then, quiet and jagged. I told him about the nights they locked me in the storage closet when my heats arrived early and ruined their expensive rugs with slick. About how my adoptive brother liked to corner me in the kitchen, whispering what he'd do if I ever fought back. About the showings that started when I was 14, paraded in front of leering alphas, scent tested, obedience graded, price negotiated. "They finally cashed in," I said, voice cracking. 30 million for an Omega slut to wipe drool off a Mafia corpse. Tears stung hot. I swiped them away, furious at myself. You probably wouldn't have wanted any of this. Some pathetic Omega crying on your 1,000 thread count sheets. The monitor beeped once, sharply, faster than before. I froze. It was just a coincidence. It had to be. I stayed until my eyelids burned. When I finally stood, something snagged my attention. A thin, pale scar running along the edge of his jaw. The accident reports I'd obsessively read online described massive head trauma, shattered ribs, internal bleeding. Scars from 4 years ago should be silvered and faded. This one looked angry and recent. I shook my head hard. I was just going through grief, exhaustion, paranoia. That was all. I slipped through the connecting door into my room. It was smaller than his but still obscene in its luxury. Silk bedding, marble bathroom, closet already filled with clothes tailored to my exact measurements. Someone had measured me without my knowledge. The thought made my skin crawl. I showered until the water turned icy, scrubbing at invisible hands. When I finally crawled beneath the covers, I left the adjoining door cracked open. Just in case the machine's alarmed. Just in case he needed something. That night I dreamed of green eyes snapping open in the darkness, pinning me in place, watching every tear I'd ever shed. And somewhere deep in the estate, in a hidden drawer I wasn't supposed to know existed, a phone vibrated once, but it was left unanswered. Mornings began with the soft chime of the medical monitor prompting me to check his vitals. His heart rate steady at 68, oxygen saturation perfect, pupils reactive under the penlight even though no one was supposed to be home behind those closed lids. I moved through the motions like a ghost in someone else's life. I bathed him every third day. The routine was clinical on paper. Warm water, fragrance-free soap, soft cloths, no unnecessary contact. In practice it felt obscene. His body was still powerful. Broad shoulders, defined chest, long limbs corded with muscle that hadn't wasted away the way it should have after 4 years immobile. I told myself the physical therapy staff kept him toned. I told myself a lot of things. The first time my fingers slid over the ridges of his abdomen while rinsing suds away, heat flooded my cheeks and pooled lower. I hated it. Hated how my Omega biology didn't care that he was supposed to be gone, that this was contractual necrophilia dressed up as duty. I finished fast, dried him with clinical efficiency, dressed him in fresh silk pajama bottoms and left the room before my breathing betrayed me. Nights were worse. I couldn't sleep with the door closed anymore. I kept it ajar, telling myself it was so I'd hear if an alarm sounded. Really, it was because the silence on the other side felt alive. Sometimes I'd drag the armchair closer to his bed and read aloud from the leather-bound books on his shelves, old crime novels, philosophy texts in Italian, a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. I liked to imagine he could hear me. That somewhere, deep down, the ruthless Alessandro Moretti was listening to an unwanted Omega ramble about revenge and justice. "You'd probably hate Dumas," I murmured one night, voice barely above the hiss of the ventilator. "He's too theatrical. You'd just shoot the guy and be done with it." The monitor beeped once, sharper, quicker, like agreement. I laughed under my breath. See? Even vegetables have opinions. That was when the heat started creeping in. I'd been on suppressants since I was 12, cheap pharmacy brands my adoptive mother shoved down my throat every morning like vitamins. They dulled the edges, kept me functional, kept me from embarrassing the family during my cycles. But the estate's medical-grade suppressants were different. Cleaner. Stronger. And apparently not strong enough when I spent 12 hours a day breathing in trace amounts of an alpha's natural scent. It began as a low simmer behind my navel. By day 5 it was a constant aching awareness. His cedar and smoke pheromones clinging to the sheets, the pillows, my own skin after I'd touched him. I doubled my dose. It didn't help. That night the fever broke through. I woke drenched in sweat, my thighs slick, every nerve screaming. The room spun. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, pressed my forehead to the marble counter until my teeth chattered. When that didn't work, I crawled back to his bedside and collapsed into the chair. "I'm sorry," I whispered, shaking. "I'm so fucking sorry. This isn't, I don't want." Tears came then, hot and humiliating. I pressed my face into the edge of his mattress, muffling the sobs. My body hurt. My mind hurt worse. I was terrified he'd somehow sense it, even in this half-death state. Terrified he'd wake up one day and remember the desperate Omega who cried and leaked and touched him while he couldn't consent. "Please don't hate me," I breathed against the sheet. I don't have anyone else to talk to." A shadow moved in the doorway. I jerked upright, heart slamming against my ribs. One of the bodyguards, tall, scarred beta, stood there watching me. His expression was unreadable. "You're loud when you cry," he said flatly. Heat flooded my face. I didn't mean." "Save it." He stepped inside, closed the door behind him with a soft click. "I'm not here to report you." I swallowed. "Then why are you here?" He glanced at Alessandro's still form, then back at me. "Because someone has to say it before you get yourself killed. There are enemies inside these walls, little Omega. Not just the ones outside the gates." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean trust no one. Not the staff. Not his sister. Not even the cousin who brings flowers every Sunday like clockwork." His gaze flicked to the monitors. "And maybe stop talking to a corpse like it's going to talk back." He turned to leave. "Wait." I stood on shaky legs. "Why tell me this?" The bodyguard paused, hand on the doorknob. "Because the last person who cried beside that bed ended up floating in the bay with their throats slit. And you?" He looked me over, almost pitying. "You look like the type who'd try to save him." Then he was gone. I stood frozen for a long minute, pulse roaring in my ears. When I finally sank back into the chair, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the book. I opened it anyway. Chapter 23. I read aloud, voice thin. The Count stood at the window, watching the moon rise over the Mediterranean. The words blurred. I kept reading. Around 3 a.m. something changed. The private phone on the nightstand, the one no one ever used, vibrated once. I stared at it like it might bite. No one came to answer it. No one ever did. I reached out, hesitated, then flipped the book shut and set it carefully on the side table. My fingers brushed Alessandro's hand, cooler than before but still warm enough to be alive. I curled my pinky around his smallest finger. Just for a second. "I don't know what's happening here," I whispered. "But if you can hear me, don't let them hurt me." "Okay." The monitor beeped twice. Almost like a promise. The fever broke after 3 miserable days, leaving me hollowed out and shaky. I'd barely left the room except to drag myself to the bathroom and back. The suppressants finally kicked in again, dulling the ache to a background hum, but the memory of curling against his mattress, whispering apologies into silk sheets, burned behind my eyelids every time I closed them. I avoided looking at his face for a full day after that. I was too ashamed and afraid I'd see judgment in those closed eyes even though they couldn't possibly see anything. On the 4th evening, the sky outside bruised purple and the estate lights came on in soft golden pools. I forced myself to resume routine. Fresh linens. A sponge bath. Reading. Normalcy as armor. I chose The Count of Monte Cristo, again, page 312, where Edmond Dantes is finally free and furious. My voice sounded thin in the quiet room. I have been a long time desiring to avenge myself. The ventilator hissed once, then clicked off into silence. Real silence. No rhythmic whoosh. No beep 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 from the monitor. Just the faint electronic hum of standby mode. My heart slammed so hard I tasted copper. I looked up slowly. Alessandro Moretti was sitting up. His green eyes were open and focused on me. The book slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. He reached up with steady hands, hands that should have been atrophied, and pulled the nasal cannula free. The tube dangled from the machine like a shed skin. He exhaled once, long and controlled, then flexed his jaw as if testing it. I couldn't breathe. He swung his legs over the side of the bed in one fluid motion, his bare feet touching marble. The hospital gown parted over muscled thighs. No tremor. No weakness. He stood. 6'4" of coiled danger in silk and cotton, staring down at me like I was prey that had wandered too close. I scrambled backward, chair scraping loudly. My back hit the wall. Nowhere to go. "Don't," I choked out. "Please don't." He tilted his head, studying me the way predators study something small and trembling. "You talk too much," he said. His voice was low, rough from disuse but unmistakable. The same voice that had once commanded rooms full of killers without raising its volume. I pressed harder against the wall. You're supposed to be vegetative." One of his dark brows lifted. "Comatose. Brain dead. A beautiful corpse." He took a single step forward. "Pick your favorite headline. They're all wrong." My knees buckled. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, legs splayed, chest heaving. "This isn't real. This can't." He crouched in front of me, elbows on his knees, close enough that I could smell cedar and warm skin and the faint metallic tang of whatever machinery had kept him breathing. His gaze raked over my face, my tear-streaked cheeks, my swollen eyes, the way my lips trembled. "I heard every word," he said quietly. My stomach dropped through the floor. "Every confession. Every sob. Every time you apologized for wanting me while I lay here pretending not to feel it." Heat roared up my neck. Shame. Horror. A sick, twisting relief. "You listened? Every night." He reached out, slow, deliberate, and brushed his thumb across the tear track on my cheek. The touch was electric. "You cried more prettily than anyone I've ever heard." I flinched. "Don't." His hand froze. Then dropped. He straightened, towering again. "Get up." I didn't move. "Kai," he called. My name in his mouth sounded like a command wrapped in velvet. "Stand." Something in his tone, authority honed by years of blood and power, made my body obey before my brain caught up. I pushed to my feet, swaying. He studied me for a long moment. "You're smaller than the photos they sent," he said almost clinically. "And you smell terrified." "I am terrified," I whispered. "Good." He turned away, walking toward the hidden panel in the wall I'd never noticed before. A soft click, and it slid open to reveal a sleek comm station. Screens, encrypted lines, maps dotted with red pins. He tapped a sequence. Voices crackled through hidden speakers. Low, urgent Italian. "Target's convoy rerouted. We hit them at the bridge in 17 minutes. Alessandro cut the feed with a flick. "For years," he said without turning. 4 years of letting every rival family think they won. Letting them get sloppy. Letting them expose themselves. He glanced back at me. "And then you show up. Crying. Reading. Touching me like I might break." I wrapped my arms around myself. "I didn't know." "I know." Something flickered in his eyes. "Regret? Hunger? That's why you're still alive." My breath hitched. He crossed back to me in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching. "You're mine now. Legally. Contractually. Biologically, if I want you to be." His gaze dropped to my throat, where my pulse hammered visibly. "But I don't take what isn't offered." I stared up at him, dizzy. "You let me think you were gone." "I let everyone think that." His voice hardened. "Including the person who tried to kill me." I swallowed. "Who?" He didn't answer right away. Instead he reached past me, plucked the fallen book from the floor, and pressed it into my shaking hands. "Keep reading to me," he said. Out loud. "Every night. Same as before." "Why?" "Because I like the sound of your voice when you're not crying." He leaned in, lips brushing the shell of my ear. "And because I need you to keep pretending. For a little while longer." My heart stuttered. "Pretending what?" "That I'm still a vegetable." He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "And that you're still the grieving widow in waiting." I searched his face, beautiful, ruthless, alive, and found no lie. Only hunger. And something dangerously close to trust. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. His thumb traced the edge of my jaw. "You already have. For weeks." He stepped away, returning to the comms panel. "Go to your room. Sleep. Tomorrow we start dismantling what's left of my enemies." Pause. "And tonight, when the lights go out, come back. Sit beside me. Cry if you need to." He glanced over his shoulder, eyes dark. "But this time, know I'm listening." I stood there, book clutched to my chest like a shield, until he turned back to the screens. Then I fled. Through the connecting door. Into my room. Under the covers. I didn't sleep. I listened instead, to the faint sounds from the medical wing. Footsteps, low voices, the soft click of keys. And beneath it all, the steady, strong beat of a heart that had never truly stopped. The next morning I woke to the scent of fresh coffee and the low murmur of voices from the medical wing. I stayed in bed longer than I should have, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he'd said the night before. The thumb on my cheek. The promise wrapped in threat. The way his eyes had darkened when he called me his. By the time I forced myself up, showered, and dressed in one of the soft cashmere sweaters left in my closet, too expensive, too perfect, too much like being dressed by invisible hands, the room beyond the connecting door had transformed. Alessandro stood at the window, back to me, wearing black tailored trousers and nothing else. The morning light carved shadows along the ridges of his spine, the faint scars that crisscrossed his back like a map of old violence. He wasn't pretending anymore. No tubes. No gown. Just skin and muscle and quiet, lethal power. He didn't turn when I entered. "You're late," he said. "I didn't know there was a schedule." "There is now." He glanced over his shoulder. "Come here." My feet moved before I could argue. He caught my wrist when I was close enough, pulled me gently but inexorably until my chest brushed his bare one. His free hand slid to the small of my back, pressing me flush against him. Heat exploded through me, his skin scorching, his scent wrapping around my throat like velvet chains. "Breathe," he murmured against my temple. "You're shaking." "I'm terrified." "I know." His lips grazed my hairline. "And I like it." I should have pushed him away. Should have remembered every horror story about alphas who took what they wanted from omegas like me. Instead I tilted my head back, meeting those green eyes that had watched me cry for weeks. He kissed me then, slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing the shape of my mouth. No rush. No violence. Just possession so complete it stole my air. When he pulled back, his thumb traced my swollen bottom lip. "Tonight," he said, voice rough, "your heat breaks through again. I can smell it building. The suppressants are failing." My stomach clenched. I doubled the dose. "They're not strong enough for proximity to me." He released me, stepping back, suddenly all business. "We maintain the facade. You still read to the vegetable. Staff sees what they expect. But in private," his gaze dropped to my throat, then lower. "You're mine to protect. And to claim if you let me." I swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" He smiled, small, dangerous. "Then I wait. But I won't pretend I'm not starving." The day passed in a fever dream of pretense. I sat beside the empty bed while nurses came and went, charting fake vitals, adjusting non-existent drips. Alessandro watched from the shadows of the adjoining study, silent, predatory. Every time a door closed, he'd appear, brushing my hair behind my ear, pressing a kiss to my pulse point, whispering filthy promises in Italian until my knees weakened. By evening the heat was unbearable. Sweat beaded along my hairline. My skin felt too tight. Slick gathered between my thighs, soaking through the thin cotton of my underwear. I excused myself to the bathroom 3 times in an hour, splashing cold water, biting my lip until it bled to keep from moaning. When the last staff member left for the night, Alessandro locked the outer doors. He found me curled on the chaise by the window, knees to chest, trembling. "Kai." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My teeth chattered. He knelt in front of me, large hands gentle on my thighs. "Look at me." I did. Tears spilled over. I can't control it." "You don't have to." He eased my legs apart, thumbs stroking the sensitive inner skin. "Let me take care of you." I should have said no. Instead I nodded. He lifted me like I weighed nothing, carried me to his bed, the same bed where I'd cried over a supposed corpse, and laid me down on cool sheets that still carried his scent. He stripped me slowly, reverently, kissing every inch of skin he uncovered. When I was bare he paused, drinking me in. "Beautiful," he breathed. "So fucking beautiful." Then his mouth was all over me, until I arched off the mattress with a broken cry. He didn't stop until I shattered, sobbing his name, fingers knotted in his hair. He kissed his way back up my body, settling between my legs, his length pressing against my entrance but not pushing in. "Tell me to stop," he rasped. I wrapped my legs around his waist instead. He then entered me, stretching, filling, claiming. Pain and pleasure blurred. I bit his shoulder to muffle my scream. He groaned against my neck, hips rolling in deep, measured strokes that dragged every nerve screaming to life. He marked me lightly, teeth grazing the junction of neck and shoulder, not breaking skin, but the promise was there. What? We moved together until the world narrowed to heat and breath and the slick slide of bodies. When I came again, clenching around him, he followed with a guttural sound, spilling deep inside me, not swelling just enough to lock us together. He held me through the aftershocks, murmuring praise in Italian, kissing tears from my cheeks. We lay tangled for hours. Then reality crept back. An urgent knock echoed at the outer door. Alessandro tensed, eased out of me carefully, pulled on trousers and disappeared into the hall. I heard muffled voices. His tone sharpened. When he returned, his expression was thunderous. "The cousin," he said. "Luca. He's been asking questions. About why the medical logs show irregular power fluctuations. About why certain cameras were offline last night." My heart stuttered. "He's loyal. Isn't he?" Alessandro's jaw tightened. "He brings flowers. He prays at my bedside. He's the only family member who still visits." A bitter laugh. "And he's the one who keeps pushing for the artificial insemination timeline to accelerate. Says it's for the family legacy." I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. "You think?" "I think trust is a luxury I can't afford." He crossed to me, cupped my face. "But I need proof. And I need you to keep acting the part. Grieving. Dutiful. Blind." I searched his eyes. "And if he's the one who? Then I'll handle it." His thumb brushed my lower lip. "But not until I'm sure." He kissed me again, harder this time, possessive. "Stay here tonight," he said. "In my bed. Where I can smell you on the sheets when I come back." I nodded. He left to meet his men. I lay there alone, body still humming, heart pounding with something dangerously close to hope. And dread. Because in the quiet, I remembered the bodyguard's warning. Enemies within. And now the man I'd just let knot me might be blind to the biggest one of all. The days after that first night blurred into a dangerous rhythm of secrets and stolen touches. Alessandro kept the medical wing staged like a museum exhibit. Tubes reattached for show, monitors blinking fake data, the ventilator hissing on cue whenever staff entered. I played my part flawlessly, the dutiful Omega widow in waiting, reading aloud in a soft, trembling voice, wiping non-existent sweat from his comatose brow, whispering goodnights to a man who was very much awake and watching me through slitted lids. But the moment the last nurse left, the performance ended. He'd pull me into the shadowed alcove behind the comms panel, or onto the wide bed, or against the cold marble of the bathroom wall, anywhere we could be alone for a handful of minutes. His hands were everywhere, possessive, reverent, desperate. He'd knot me slow and deep until I sobbed against his shoulder, then hold me through the afterglow, murmuring promises in Italian that I only half understood but felt in my bones. "I'm going to burn them all down for you," he'd whisper against my neck one night, teeth grazing the faint bruise he'd left the evening before. "Every single person who ever hurt you." I believed him. I shouldn't have. The first real crack appeared in the form of a single flower. Luca Moretti, the cousin, confidant, the only family member who still visited, arrived on a Sunday afternoon carrying his usual bouquet of white lilies. He kissed both my cheeks like we were old friends, pressed the flowers into my hands with a sad smile. "For Alessandro," he said softly. He always liked lilies. Said they reminded him of our grandmother. I forced a grateful nod. He'd appreciate it. If he could. Luca's eyes lingered on me a beat too long. "You're good to him, Kai. Better than any of us deserve." Something in his tone made my skin prickle. That evening, after Luca left, I found Alessandro in the study, staring at security footage of the visit. His jaw was tight. "He touched your wrist when he handed you the flowers," Alessandro said without preamble. "It was nothing. It was deliberate." He rewound the clip. Watched again. "He's testing boundaries. Seeing how close he can get to what's mine." I set the lilies on the desk. "They're just flowers." Alessandro plucked one from the bunch, twirled it between his fingers, then crushed it slowly. Petals fell like snow. "Luca has been pushing the medical board to fast-track the insemination protocol. Says the family needs an heir before rivals smell weakness." My stomach twisted. "You think he's?" I began. "I think he's impatient." Alessandro cut me off, his gaze meeting mine. "But impatience isn't proof." I hesitated. "There's something else." He stilled. "Tell me." I pulled a small folded paper from my pocket, the one I'd found tucked inside the lily stems that afternoon when I'd gone to arrange them in water. It had a single line of text, typed, no signature. "Check the offshore accounts. The accident wasn't random." Alessandro read it. His expression didn't change, but the air around him grew colder. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Hidden in the flowers. Luca must have." "No," he cut me off. "Luca would never be that sloppy. Someone else planted it. Someone who wants me to suspect him." I swallowed. "Or someone who wants you to look closer." Alessandro stared at the note for a long moment. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "Keep playing your part," he said. "And stay away from Luca. If he comes again, call me immediately." I nodded. But doubt had taken root. 2 nights later the heat surged again, fiercer this time, almost violent. Suppressants did nothing. I woke drenched, aching, slick pooling beneath me. Alessandro found me curled on the floor beside his bed, shaking. He didn't speak. Just lifted me, carried me to the shower, stripped us both, and let the hot water pound against our skin while he worked me open with careful fingers, then his tongue, then finally himself. Deep, relentless thrusts that had me clawing at his back, begging. When the knot locked us together, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I love you," I gasped against his mouth. The words slipped out unbidden. He froze, then kissed me so hard I tasted blood. "Don't," he rasped when he finally pulled back. "Not yet. Not until this is over." Tears mixed with the shower spray. "Why?" "Because if you say it now and something happens to you," his voice cracked, "I won't survive it." He held me tighter, nodded deeper, like he could keep the world out by sheer force of will. The next morning I found the evidence. A hidden file on the comm station, unencrypted, almost like it was left for me to discover. Bank transfers. Dates matching the night of the accident. Recipient, an offshore shell company traced back to Luca's private holdings. A single audio clip, Luca's voice low and furious. He should have died. The brakes were cut. The driver was paid. Why the fuck is he still breathing? My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the drive. I confronted Alessandro in the study that evening. He listened in silence as I played the clip. When it ended, he didn't move. "I told you," I whispered. "It's him." Alessandro's eyes were glassy. "He was 12 when our grandmother died. I promised her I'd protect him. Raised him like a brother." "I know." "He tried to kill me." The words came out flat, hollow. I stepped closer. "Alessandro." He grabbed me suddenly, spun me, pressed me back against the desk. His mouth crashed onto mine, angry, grieving, desperate. Hands toward clothes. He lifted me onto the edge of the desk, spread my thighs and entered in without preamble. "Art. Punishing." I cried out, nails digging into his shoulders. He made love to me like he was trying to erase the betrayal with every stroke. Rough, relentless, not swelling fast and locking us tight. When he came, it was with a broken sound against my throat. Afterward he didn't pull out. Just held me, forehead pressed to mine, breathing ragged. "I have to end this," he said quietly. "I know." That night the estate went into lockdown. Alarms shrieked. Gunfire echoed in the halls. Luca had come for me, slipping past the outer guards with a small team of mercenaries he'd bought with the same money he'd used to try to kill Alessandro years ago. They dragged me from the medical wing, zip-tied my wrists, pressed a gun to my temple. Alessandro found us in the north wing corridor. He stood alone, unarmed, still in the silk pajama bottoms he'd worn to bed, eyes blazing. "Let him go," he said. Voice calm. Deadly. Luca laughed. "You're supposed to be a vegetable, cousin. Look at you. Still playing the martyr." Alessandro's gaze flicked to me. "Kai, close your eyes." I did. The gunshot was deafening. When I opened them again, Luca was on the floor, a neat hole between his eyes. Alessandro stood over him, smoking pistol in hand, taken from one of the fallen mercenaries. He looked at me then, blood on his cheek, eyes shattered. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I crossed the distance on shaking legs, wrapped my arms around him despite the zip ties. "I love you," I said again. This time he didn't tell me to stop. He just held me tighter. As the estate burned around us, rival teams exploiting the chaos, bombs going off in the distance, he carried me to safety. But the war wasn't over yet. The estate burned for 3 days. Not the whole thing, only the north wing where Luca's mercenaries had breached, and the old safe house 2 kilometers down the private road where the last surviving rival family tried to finish what Luca started. Explosions lit the night sky like fireworks gone wrong. Gunfire cracked until dawn. I spent most of it locked in the panic room beneath the medical wing, knees to chest, listening to the muffled chaos above while Alessandro hunted. He came back to me at sunrise on the 3rd day, covered in soot, blood drying on his knuckles, eyes hollow but alive. He didn't speak at first. Just unlocked the door, pulled me into his arms, and held me so tight I felt every shudder in his frame. "They're gone," he said finally, voice raw. "All of them." I pressed my face into his neck, breathing him in, cedar, smoke, copper. "Luca. Dead." The word came out flat. "I did it myself. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. We emerged into daylight that felt too bright, too clean. The staff who remained, only the loyal ones, moved like ghosts, clearing debris, tending the wounded. Alessandro walked among them, issuing quiet orders, but his hand never left mine. That afternoon he made the announcement. No press conference. No staged awakening with doctors fawning and cameras flashing. Just a single encrypted message sent to every major player left in the underworld, and a quiet post on the dark web channels that still whispered his name. Alessandro Moretti is no longer comatose. The king never fell. He waited. Within hours the world knew. Tabloids exploded. Social feeds drowned in speculation. Old enemies went silent. New ones hesitated. The man they'd mocked as a beautiful corpse had been dismantling them from the grave for 4 years. No one dared move against him now. But the real storm came for me. Reporters camped at the gates. Drones buzzed overhead until security shot them down. My adoptive family issued a tearful public statement, how they'd only wanted the best for their poor Omega son, how devastated they were by the misunderstanding. I watched the clip on Alessandro's phone while curled in his lap on the study sofa. He muted it halfway through. "They'll pay," he said quietly. I shook my head. "Not with blood. Not anymore." He looked at me, really looked. Something in his expression softened. "Then what do you want?" I took a breath. "I want to be free of them. Legally. Publicly. And I want us. Not the contract. Not the air clause. Just us." He studied me for a long moment. Then he kissed my forehead. "Done." 2 weeks later the contract was burned, literally. Alessandro held the original in the fireplace of the main hall while I watched the flames eat the paper that had priced me at $50 million total. He'd already transferred the money back to an account in my name, clean, untouchable, more than I could ever spend. My adoptive family received a quiet visit from his lawyers. A new ironclad NDA. A warning. And the sudden, inexplicable collapse of every business they'd ever touched. They disappeared from public view after that. I didn't ask where. The heat came again that night. Natural this time, no suppressants, no shame. Alessandro took me slowly on the wide bed where it had all begun. No performance. No cameras in the walls. Just skin on skin, breath on breath, his knot locking us together while he whispered against my ear. "Marry me." I laughed through tears. "We're already married. Not like this." He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "Not in public. Not with vows I actually mean. Not with a ring I choose and a promise I keep." My heart stuttered. "Yes," I whispered. He kissed me like I'd given him the world. Months passed in a strange, fragile peace. The estate was rebuilt, quieter now, fewer guards, more sunlight. Alessandro stepped back from the day-to-day violence, delegating to men he trusted. He still ruled, he just no longer had to prove it with blood. And then the test came back positive. Natural. No doctors. No machines. Just us. I told him in the garden at dusk, the same spot where I'd once stood terrified at the gates. I pressed the stick into his hand and watched his face change. Shock, wonder, something dangerously close to joy. He dropped to his knees right there in the grass. Pressed his forehead to my stomach. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you for staying." I threaded my fingers through his hair. "Thank you for waking up." The wedding was small. Only his inner circle, a quiet officiant, the garden lit with lanterns. I wore white silk that pooled around my feet. He wore black, no tie, sleeves rolled to his elbows. When he slid the ring onto my finger, a simple platinum band engraved with a single word in Italian, "Mio," I cried. He kissed me under the stars while our small audience clapped. Later, in our room he took me again, gentle this time, reverent. His hands cradled the faint swell of my belly that wasn't visible yet but we both knew was there. "I was sold to a vegetable," I murmured against his throat when we lay tangled afterward. He huffed a laugh. "And I woke up to the only person who ever cried for me." I lifted my head. "I'd do it again." His eyes darkened. "Don't?" I smiled. "Too late." He rolled us so I straddled him, hands on my hips. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to." I leaned down, kissed him slowly and deeply. "Promise." "Vow," he corrected. And in the quiet of the estate that had once felt like a prison, I finally understood what speechless really meant. Not shock. Not fear. Just the overwhelming, impossible truth. I'd been sold to die slowly beside a fallen king. Instead I'd woken him up. And he'd saved me right back. Hi lovely viewers, if you watched to the end, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share and leave a comment. Your support means everything to me. Thank you.